Many thanks for the chair for the introduction. Many thanks as well for the organizers for the invitation, and as well thank you very much for my research cluster at the home university for making possible the trip and visit here in the wonderful city of Wrocław. So I want to build on this what my previous speaker was talking about. I run through the few examples. I will try to show some of the things in the base, maybe a little bit for the doctor researchers, so my method of bringing the theory and practice. Two things from the outset. So like Lambert Wiesing was saying before, what it is not. I don't understand the examples which I'm doing as artistic research. I wouldn't put such a claim. However, I think I'm operating in design and visual communication, and the work produced is pretty much on the intersection between media, studies, Kommunikationswissenschaften, communication design, and generally design. So that's where I'm using some of the artistic research, and I try to pinpoint them, but I'm not understanding them as such, as own artistic research. Okay. So let's start with the with the title. I was already asked by few people in between. What do I mean with Viscourses? So the term Viscourse, which appears in the title of my today's presentation, comes originally from the field of science studies. It was introduced around the year 2000 by Karin Knoa-Cetina as an amalgamation of visual and discourse. So we're jumping from the previous example to 21st century. The term emphasizes the specific character of scientific practices and epistemic methods that are genuinely characterized by the use of visual means. Using the example of visual representations and visualization of scientific laboratory experiments in high-energy physics, so exactly very abstract models, Knoa-Cetina shows that such visualization do not simply accompany scientific experiments, but have a significance for the execution and evaluation, and are thus a constitutive component of any research. The analogization of visual methods with discourse, which is made with the concept of Viscourse, aims at the fact that visual methods in many cases do not merely illustrate and clarify facts and hypotheses, but in many cases produce independent forms of thinking and argumentation. So Viscourses, for example, enable other ways of experimental variation and coordinating comparison than discursive procedures. The great potential lies above all in the fact that they often make verbal communication superfluous. Knoa-Cetina argues that this is already evidenced by the fact that Viscourses in scientific research are considered the most effective means of generating, sorting, and communicating subject-specific knowledge in small groups. In this context, she states, I use on the screen the original writing. She writes in German, for the clarity, but I read as well my translation of this. So the first quote, where Viscourses exist, discourse is quickly dismissed as mere talk or does not show experimental results and does not provide evidence for the performance of certain work. Second quote, work, I think 2 years later, one can emphasize phenomenal reality and thus experience and give special meaning to these realities by recalling visual impressions. But one can also emphasize and bring invisible phenomenal reality into focus through graphic renderings. In other words, Viscourses offer the possibility of dispensing with explicit, linguistically guided interpretations and do instead act in a more unmediated, perceptual way, maintaining a certain polyvalence and productive openness. They replace often the interpretation or at least limit its necessity by integrating methods of comparative seeing and visualization into the investigation, which are often better able to do justice to certain objects of investigation. It should be emphasized, however, that Viscourses and Discourses are not to be understood as antagonists. Viscourse cannot replace discourse any more than discourse can do without a certain visuality, and if only in realm of imagination. A viscourse is viscourse and not meaningless, undirected stringing of indifferent images, only if in the context of traditionally understood discursive embedding. So that's how often the images in those type of practices are characterized. Following that line of argumentation, we can say that discourses are located precisely between the aesthetic and the operative of the image and image construction. This also means that applying them as an exploratory method, we can use both discursive scientific and visual image argumentation and analysis techniques. Without necessarily having to make a clear distinction between these two areas of visualization. It is visualization, those areas correspond. They exist within one image or series of images, not as a separate writings in different faculties. To apply to what I'm preaching, at this point I would like to present 4 such discourses, following 2 visual explorative procedures. All of the examples are based on the open source programming language called processing, which was initially developed at the MIT to carry out design tasks. The examples I will be showing are taken from, which you saw already before, but I'm using the time to compress the amount of slides. The examples I will be showing are taken from comparative study of covers of a German and the Polish weekly news magazines, the Spiegel and Polityka. This selection is based on the fact that so-called illustrated magazines and other magazines belonging to the entertaining segment, so the so-called rainbow press, are less complex than magazines belonging to the information segment, both in their social function and in their operational and design quality. That's hopefully without much argumentation. The time frame selection of Spiegel and Polityka is based on their temporal continuity. So the first issue of the Spiegel is from 4th January 1947. The first issue of Polityka was on 2nd of January 1957. So 10 years difference, but the longest still running weekly political magazines I could find in both countries. In order to visualize the contextual diversity as well as the structural unity underlying this diversity, I simply arranged as a starting point, I arranged all of the front pages published since the first issue in 1947 up to the year 2010, which was the introduction, maybe some of you remember, the introduction of iPad, which at the time was heralded as a potential print killer, the end of print within the publishing industry. By the way, both magazines are still appearing, both in the digital form and in print form. Subsequently, I started experimenting with this material further and visualize synchronously the front pages of all 52 issues of 2 volumes. So from 1968 and 1968, so 1968 and 1998, so 30-year difference between, in one image, each through quantitative visual multiplication. So simple multiplication, really simple mathematical transmission of the pixels and division through the amount of material. So far, so good, and in accordance with the operative logic of our object of investigation, we are ultimately more concerned with the visualizing the autonomous medial character of the magazine's title pages and its aesthetics than with its hermeneutic interpretation. So once again, I want to underline, I'm not interested in the what is visualized there? What is the kind of, what are the topics? That's not like that's another study. I'm interested in the format, structures, typography being used, some kind of patterns which are able to observe and analyze over longer periods of time. Let's follow this up with two more advanced examples of Viscourses. In both of them, we will subject the visual forms of representation of the system to a generalizing abstraction and a specific reduction to the dimension of visual perceptual experience. In the first method, sorry, that's still the compression of kind of Politica and Spiegel. In the first method which I want to produce is inspired by the sketches and the relevant considerations of Paul Klee in the context of his lectures at Bauhaus from 1924. There, using the example of, quote the name, linear analysis of his painting, the painting Klee is explaining it to the students is Häuser in der Landschaft, from 1924, and the second version, the revision of this, is from 1939. Klee develops a pictorial construction method by drawing, and again, his name is significantly longer than this, but more precise, but I use the translation, horizontal approximations, and that's the longer, very catching phrase, changing perpendiculars and deviations from the plumb line with a left-right moving eye point. That's kind of his very catchy description of the kind of the method he developed as his artistic practice. Maybe more importantly, Klee describes the basic principle of this method as follows. Again, in German, in original, and I translate. The eye, like a grazing animal, scans the surface not only from top to bottom, but also from left to right, and in every direction for which there is an occasion. The eye grazes from the values that attract it to the values that attract it further, when the first values have already been grazed. So from this very kind of abstract title to a very grounding description based in the agriculture. We want to translate Klee's method into an algorithm that uses the contrast values of individual RGB color channels of the source image and their positioning on the cover pages to trace the change in direction vectors of the depicted shapes. So the strongest changes, so I'm using the example of very mixed kind of across all of the material which was constructed, but that's kind of to show you how differently it can be applied on different material. The strongest changes on the examined surface mark the areas with particular dynamic object contouring and thus with particularly high attention potential, something which, graphic designers, the kind of publisher, is always interested to guide you attention, to guide you your interest in particular ways. So that's the selection, that's the overall iterations of this, and then kind of the parameters which I decided to run the full study with. Okay, quickly jump to show you the second method. I know the time is running. The second method I want to showcase aims at analyzing the intensity of color contrasts, which have also been identified as attention-directing factors in empirical studies. I will be not going here into the kind of Eaton's theory at Bauhaus. That's kind of, that's too wide. But for this purpose, I want to actually come to the Voronoi diagram, which basically as a structure divides a given area into color regions for likewise given numbers of centers. So the history of Voronoi diagram goes back to the 17th century. Descartes already delineated the regions of influence around the fixed stars in his famous drawings on the structure of the universe from Principia Philosophiae. That's on the cover. It's still, I saw it in the bookstore around in Poland. Still use this as a kind of as a cover. It was quite out of copyrights in this sense. So Principia Philosophiae, that's kind of these regions of influence corresponded exactly to Voronoi regions in their shape construction. So maybe as a kind of side note or anecdote, linking this to kind of to my previous speaker, Descartes as philosopher was completely, this is bonkers. He was completely wrong with the theory. The astronomy proved it already at the time. It's not working like this. It absolutely doesn't have, it's not as correct astrophysicism. But saying this, the method of constructing Voronoi diagrams and those centers prove absolutely crucial for the kind of for modern computer graphics and creating 3D environments, particularly important now in the virtual reality, augmented reality, any of the kind of construction of three-dimensional spaces in as artificial constructions. So the Voronoi regions constructed in this way have the special property that all points of a region are closer to their center than to all other region centers. In other words, each Voronoi region of the decomposed color surface includes all points that are determined by exactly one centrum in the relation to the Euclidean metric and are closer to this center than to any other center. So that's again to kind of as visualization, and that's the kind of transformation in the into processing. Okay, if I have more and time, then I want to show the kind of final empirical part of the study. Because so far it's all of the kind of research, putting hypotheses how it could be. But if we want to kind of combine it with the empirical methods, in order to be able to visually and at the same time empirically assess the attractors in the magazine covers, I propose to use the cognitive scientific eye tracking method to determine which visual representation of the analyzed cover pages are observed with which intensity of attention. So we are here primarily interested in the question of whether intersubjective patterns can be identified in the magazine covers which are examined, and how these can be correlated with the previously developed discourses. So it's in a way, it's basically triangulation, visual triangulation of the different methods to find does it have any empirical standing, or am I constructing some own hallucination in this sense that the things, and other theories of design, as we know from the past very often, this is kind of rather opinions than anything standing in the proven by the public. So the recorded eye movements can be characterized as a combination of 4 basic patterns. The vestibular balance compensation, the saccades, the microsaccades, and the fixations. So that's the kind of, the discipline agrees on the kind of, the common ground here is exactly this this 4 different parts. For attentional processes, we are aiming at investigation. Fixations are particularly relevant as a measurement and evaluation parameters of the experiments. So fixations are those moments of the information intake during which the eyes are at a relative standstill. So the visual cortex is aligned with the pupil and observed point on a visual axis, and this is the moment where they are being stabilized. They kind of stand still and the information intake is happening. In the shorter saccade following each fixation, on the other hand, no information acquisition is possible. So rather a preparation of the eye for the new fixation takes place here, which leads to so-called saccadic blindness. It's often called as well saccadic suppression. As a rule, 100 milliseconds are chosen to distinguish marker above these values. So above the value of 100 milliseconds, we're talking about fixation. Below this, we're talking about saccade. I'm going to an end. I skip this bit because I think I'm running. So this is basically final visualization. I skip it as a heat map. You can imagine how the heat maps are constructed, interesting areas, less interesting areas, kind of putting it all together as a kind of as a scale. Just to conclude and not to left you with this kind of rather terrifying image as a kind of final thing, to conclude, in the context of my experiments, the concept of Viscourses is meant to capture 2 things. Firstly, the operativity of the journal cover itself, and secondly, a central form of representation of the respective results of the investigation. So kind of visual argumentation for this, what I was finding on the way of my PhD. With the help of this form of representation, into which the work ultimately culminates, the function of operative pictoriality and aesthetic pictoriality is demonstrated. In accordance with the operative logic of the object of investigation, we are ultimately more concerned with visualizing the autonomous medial character of the magazine title page and its aesthetic than with its hermeneutic representation, or interpretation, more precisely. It is not surprising that since the use of computers, the possibilities of such mathematical transformations have been increased quantitatively as well as qualitatively by the explosion of amount of data that can now be processed in such way that completely new connections in the existing bodies of knowledge can be revealed. And it's obvious also that these new possibilities of data generation also open up a new dimension for discourses outside of natural sciences. Related to this new dimension, it is fact that such discourses function less interpretatively and more comparatively. We're kind of seeing the images in comparison to each other rather than interpreting them to the kind of knowledge which we have before. And this follows rather the paradigm of databases than of the kind of very often previously used paradigm of narrativity of something which needs to be said in particular way. Good. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thanks for really fascinating paper. And we are run out of the time, but still maybe one short question, and only, unfortunately, one.
So what was the last point that you were making with the distinction between narrativity and discourse?
No, the last point is that it's moving. This is a method, moves basically the methodological methods, moves it closer, this axis, moves it closer to the logic of databases. So compilation of images and bringing this as a starting point for comparisons, rather than narrative interpretation. What is the hermeneutics of this? What is happening there? How it the history, if you want, of this as an object or as a discipline.
So does this term, this course, my intuition for this sort of out of nowhere might be that it could involve progression of a concept across time, but no?
Absolutely.
Okay, so why hadn't you addressed the issue of motion in a visual, so an infographic with motion, perhaps some degree of animation. Indeed, you had frequently sort of highlighted focal points of attraction for the neural response, and I think the neural response that's most intertwined with attention is actually attention to motion, and all of the images that you showed were static images.
Absolutely right. This is another, that's way more complicated study from my side. What I'm interested, I'm graphic designer, typographer. I'm interested exactly at the static image, plus maybe now expanding it into virtual reality, augmented reality with all of the consequences. But at the time, the study is having already a few years, this predating the databases. At the time, this is pre-Mid-Journey, all of the tools which we have now at our disposal. This is pretty much based in the static image of the cover of the magazines. How do designers, simple aim, how do designers know where to put the elements? What are the decisions? There's plenty of theories, typographics telling you where to put, very strict rules from Chihold to to David Carson, as a kind of postmodern way of dealing with this. Where is it based in? What is it where does it come from? What's the knowledge of the trade? How does it imply if we look at this over a longer period of time? So my interest was basically, to answer your question one more time, it would be fascinating study. I would love to follow up exactly on moving image. At this time, my object of study is just static image.
All right.
Okay, so here we go. This paper deals with the connections between diffused and focused thinking modes and their influence on the overall creative act in science and arts. While traditionally the creative act is commonly associated with artistic disciplines, the current thinking directs us to the contrary. There is no definite difference between an author of an artwork and an author of a scientific study. In both cases, the artist and the scientist cause creative act to emerge, and they conclude it with a unique body of work. The difference, however, manifests itself at the point of emphasis on thinking modes in both groups. Scientists seem to be trained more in focused thinking tools, whereas the artists tend to put more emphasis on the diffused. This choice of dominance in terms of respective selection seems to go against the latest brain science research, which states without a doubt that the innovative discovery is a result of trained switching between diffused and focused thinking. Before elaborating on what exactly I mean while talking about the diffused and focused, I feel it's important to quote here Guy Claxton, who in his book entitled Hair, Brain, Tortoise, Mind wrote, "Despite the widely held assumption that D mode, decisive analytical, represents the most powerful thinking tool we possess, the truth is that our ideas, and often our best ideas, do not arrive as a result of faultless chains of reasoning." The reason why I've chosen Claxton's statement is that for too long, it seems to me, we have been stuck believing that a coin can never be flipped. And thus, we illogically decided that one discipline shall focus on the heads, while the other on the tails. This rather false division further encouraged the glorification of the D mode over any other modes of thinking, almost as if it was possible to switch on and off certain parts of the brain when needed. The human brain, however, escapes any futile attempts of branding, and the recent research clearly states there are two predominant modes of thinking. I'm using in this paper the terms diffused and focused, but in other sources we may come across other terminology. Soft and hard thinking, the conscious, the unconscious, the analytical and intuitive, just to name a few. I lean towards the focused and diffused more, as those seem to be stripped of any past connotations, including any esoteric, new age, romanticized ideas of an intuitive guiding of any form. And just to be clear, let me voice a very simplified clarification of the two terms. Focus mode encompasses all types of synaptic activity traditionally associated with analytical, computational, critical, logical, and articulated activities. Diffused mode encompasses all types of synaptic activity traditionally associated with synthetical activities using the pathways of passive, background, involuntary, I don't really like those, but this is off the point, information processing relating to the way knowledge arranges itself in the mind without any conscious effort on the part of a doer. I came across a list of manifestations related to diffused mode. It included such states as feelings, a sense of unease, insights, pop-up thoughts, images, dreams, guesses, confident feeling of rightness without a proof, inklings, fleeing thoughts and flashes, promptings and hunches. These manifestations tend to be encouraged by engaging oneself in daydreaming, sleeping, taking a shower, being bored, and many, many more. In principle, we are born with an inborn ability to persist in a dynamic balance between the focused and diffused modes. Our brain has the ability to freely switch between the two when the need arises. Both modes are indispensable. In an optimal mental state, the switching between the modes is unnoticeable. By this, I mean that our brain has the capacity to accommodate the point of concentration to a situation we are in. However, somebody invented educational systems, which effectively, right from the kindergarten, stole and ultimately kill this ability. By the time students arrive in our academic institutions, they are somewhat like thinking impotents. Either they were led to believe in the power of analytical thinking, or having certain problems with the standardized education, they fled into the realms of softer ways of thinking. As educators, if we want to embrace the latest research on thinking, we are faced with a challenge of retraining people. If only our job was to reteach something lost. But we also have to battle myths and biases concerning what is serious and what is incompetent in embarking on a scientific study or artistic project. Let me conclude this part with a clear statement. Both science and arts would benefit greatly from widespread, sustained changes in educational models. Models which would reflect what we know about how brain actually works, not what we thought about it over 100 years ago. During my PhD and since gaining it, the key question for me has been to incorporate into an art practice and academic courses the mindful utilization of both modes. The first attempt, reflected in the artwork part of my PhD, focused on the staged, dopamine-induced workflow by a neurologist, Alice Fogarty. Fogarty's classical nowadays work offered some solution as to how to control the two modes in creative work. Her research suggested that at the outset of a project, artistic or scientific, we should activate as much as we can the focus mode of thinking and thus immerse ourselves in experiencing, experimenting, analyzing, observing, noting, examining, etc. At the peak of research frenzy comes stage 2. The focus stops to lend way to diffused. We begin incubation stage, during which we delight ourselves with such activities as taking a shower, making love, sleeping, going for a walk. The brain works by itself on the problem, and the best we can do is to leave it alone. This is the moment when we may experience the manifestations I mentioned earlier. If we do, Fogarty urges to switch off the internal critic and note down absolutely everything. And it may happen that we will be lucky enough to receive a complete and comprehensible result. But in most cases, we may deal with seemingly inconsistent fragments, which need to be connected or filled. Therefore, the last stage, more than anything, requires a competent and informed switches between the modes. I tested Fogarty's findings in my PhD art piece entitled Boredom, Anxiety, and Rotting Apples. It was a 60-minute long audio broadcast. I designed the audio track so it cross-activated different parts of the brain. It followed the stage dopamine inducement suggested by Fogarty, and indeed the results were impressive. The participants, active listeners, entered a state of immersive flow and experience at trance-like moments, where images overflowed their minds. No wonder, if you tap into a physiology, the physiology works for you. I concluded the first attempt with a successful incorporation of Fogarty's model into my day-to-day art practice. I also integrated it into 2 courses I'm running at the Academy of Fine Arts in Kraków. The first one called Grad Skills Studio for BFA and MFA students, and the second one called the Artistic Education Methodology at the doctoral school of the same academy. In both cases, I've been working on the design of them from the scratch. And in both cases, I strive to achieve the point where the knowledge of the 2 modes would contribute with some sustainable changes in students' art practices after graduation or in teaching practices of PH candidates. On the threshold of the third year teaching, this paper gives me a great opportunity to conclude with a brief summary of my insights so far. 1. Benefit from self-contextualization. By that, I mean that our brains thrive on self-interest. So if we want people to get involved, there has to be something personally engaging for them. For that reason, from class 1, I pay special attention to teach people a simple method of reflecting. Students in their new notebooks are asked to answer 3 simple questions in reference to the material from the class. How can I make use of it? Why? When and how will I use it? Effective reflection has to be taught, and it should allow for multiple forms of reflection. It is fantastic when people have a chance to answer the same question using 3 or more different forms of expression. For example, a diagram, a paragraph, performance. So these could be later analyzed to draw conclusions. So they can see, where they've missed, in which summary. Benefit from play intertwined with emotionally charged experiences. These two always go together. Worked for us when we were children. And guess what? As our adult brains did not grow out of it. Emotions and play are also related to moving. Brain's primary function is to control muscles. So if we want to think better, we need to move. It goes in line with what Lev Vygotsky said over 100 years ago. Embodied experience establishes meaning and intellectual understanding. 3. Benefit from an individual endeavor with a dynamic social negotiation. Just like there is a need for a skillful dance between the focused and diffused thinking, best results of creative thinking come from a dynamic switching between working alone and structured feedback from others. Again, our brains are wired to be social. We can use this to our advantage in 2 ways. First, by teaching others. To make it further beneficial, teach using as simple and straightforward language as it is possible. Second, use collective joint prefrontal cortexes. After a period of working on a project alone, an individual returns to the group in order to get feedback. I like using critical incident analysis method, and also C-sketching is good for that. Seeing your work through the eyes of the others helps you notice gaps in your reasoning or cognitive biases the project may have. 4. Benefit from cross-brain activation. For example, why not combine a logic-based activity with balancing a body? Seems time-consuming? Well, if it forces anything, it is the unexpected synaptic activity. Some infrequently visited brain parts may get activated on the way, and all of a sudden, boom, we come across some unexpected solution idea. The cross-brain activation is very much linked with a conscious effort to question our ways of doing things, which is commonly called unlearning. Making the familiar strange or the strange familiar forces to light up several synaptic circuits at once. One of my favorite exercises for PhD candidates is to break down what it takes to walk downstairs backwards. Upon completing this exercise, I ask them to relate the experience from this exercise to the practice of making art. 5. Benefit from balance between work and leisure. Any form of meditation. Introduce technology detox. I'm sorry, but too much data, too much digital is actually destroying the balance between the 2 modes of thinking. Feed your body well. Brain consumes most of what you eat. Create a strong social network outside your work so you don't structure your identity solely on your professional stuff. Practice any form of spirituality, forest bathing, fermenting, singing, running through the forest naked, whatever. And most of all, do make mistakes and reflect on them. I invite you now to pause, and if you could make yourself 1% more comfortable, please do so. In remaining minutes of my presentation, I would like to show you 5 drawings I did, which complement the content of my talk. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for fascinating paper, and what is also important, we still have time for questions. Please.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought that was a great presentation, and I really enjoyed the sort of thoroughness of your research practice in terms of addressing this very important issue. I'm sure it's important for all of us here who are artists, but not only who are artists, but anybody who engages in any kind of creative activity, and that's pretty much everybody. Whoever has to write anything or prepare anything for a class even. And I used to think a lot about this kind of issue, specifically with the issue of what broadly is known as writer's block. That is to say, somebody's sitting there and they've got to do something and they can't make any progress, or they can't get any ideas, or suddenly they don't feel productive as a creative person. All of those kinds of things, and it feels to me that often that's a consequence of trying to do something with the wrong kind of brain activity or the wrong kind of circumstances. You talked a lot about these circumstances, and I thought it was great. And you talked about it, you know, in the light of some fantastic sounding research. And I just wondered, now you've, you know, done all of this fantastic work, have you applied these principles to your own creative work and found yourself to be more productive? That's the first. I loved your drawings at the end. And have you ever thought of sort of going into practice with it, in a sense, and helping other people? Because, you know, I think that the thoroughgoing nature of what you've done and the findings that you had in your research, you know, sound like that you could be a great help to others. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your words. Yes, actually, this is what I've been doing at the Academy of Fine Arts in Kraków. I was so happy that through sort of some strange coincidences, a subject that nobody had any idea for, actually the subject was abandoned for the last 10 years, became absolutely vacant, and none of my colleagues at the faculty wanted to touch it. It was called the Grad Skills Studio, and I thought, wow, it's actually waiting for me, because it was just such a perfect place to translate, as you said, you know, this rather complicated research into something practical and applicable. My role is to help people to get to the fence, and it's really horrible, because after 3 years of studying at any academy, I'm just talking about Polish academy, but you know, Polish situation, maybe in your countries it's completely different. But after 3 years, I've noticed that we take incredibly creative people, and something happens in the process of educating them, and by the time they arrive in my class, they are petrified to create. And it's not that the criticism is massive at the academia. Actually, it's the opposite. The internal critic is stopping them. They have got so many different parrots sitting on their shoulders, and you know, those parrots are telling them that they are useless, horrible, they don't know, they can't, you know, that they are stalled from day one. So my research actually became incredibly helpful in practical terms for them. So I structured my class into 4 pillars, as I call it. And first of all, I start with taking care of your body, because nobody is talking about taking care of your body. It's it's assumed, even the students come with an assumption that art projects are happening somewhere there or maybe somewhere inside here, and the rest of the body is not connected at all. Yeah, so they are overworking, they're taking substances, they are not eating, they are working long hours, they listen to some of the silly teachers who want to be incredibly ambitious, and they do 7 or 8 different projects a year. On top of that, they are supposed to submit the dissertation, and then everybody is surprised that these people can't do it, and they sort of disappear a month before the defense. Yeah, so I start with that, and then I introduce the basics of the 2 modes, and I show them how they can actually work with ourselves and how being kind to your body actually benefits you with something fantastic that you are really proud of.
So, hello. I'm going to talk about mind wandering during lecture, which you can probably relate to now, since this is the 2nd day of the conference and already 12th presentation in a row. So, while program of conferences can look something like this, with a clear distinction where one presentation ends and where the other presentation starts. When presentations are so interesting as those today, you keep thinking about them even when another speaker is already speaking. So in our mind, it looks more like this. So while listeners' minds are fresh at the beginning of a session, the speakers towards the end might have a hard time to get their audience to focus. And something like this happens also during single lectures. So a lecturer is giving a lecture, so her mind is hopefully paying attention to what she is saying. A listener, at least at the beginning, is also paying attention, so they are both thinking about the same thing at the same time. But then, maybe the lecturer says something so interesting that it will spark the imagination of the listener, and his thoughts will diverge from those of the speaker, until the speaker notices it and says, "Are you still with me?" Which interrupts the line of thoughts of the listener and aligns them with those of the speaker. And then the lecture continues, but maybe after a while the lecture gets too boring or too complex, so the listener gets lost again. And occasionally, especially when it looks like nobody is paying attention anymore, the speaker gets disconcerted as well and loses her attention, which is awkward and unfortunately for the speaker usually attracts the attention of the listeners. And for situations like this, one friend, artist Daniel Jovino, recommends to have an emergency conclusion card, which will help to bring the lecture to the end. Academic lectures and conferences are formats for shared listening, but somehow they took on conventions that make the listening itself difficult. So you sit quietly for a long time without moving, looking into one direction. the program is usually very dense, so there is no time or very little time to think about what has been said. Lecturers, especially in humanities, often read aloud complicated texts that are good for reading, but not for listening. And even artistic research conferences took on these conventions, which is surprising to me because artists normally spend so much time tinkering with forms of expression. Also, when you are presenting, it feels like you have to have a PowerPoint. The slides sometimes include texts that are different from what the listener is saying. So as a listener, you don't know if you should keep listening to the speaker or to read the text on the slide. Also, lecturers tend to click through slides very quickly, as if the eyes of the listeners were document cameras, able to perceive them in one blink. Many conferences are very strict about timing, unlike this one. And this aspect of giving a lecture reminds me of curling. So you get, for example, 15 minutes, and now you don't want to finish too early, because then you look like you have not much to say. But if you pass the time limit, then they cut you off and you won't finish your argument. For many lecturers, the given amount of time is not enough, so they try to find ways how to squeeze as much materials as possible. One of the techniques is to write everything down, and then as the end of the lecture is approaching, read the text as fast as possible. The lecturer is satisfied that they said everything they wanted to say, but the listeners probably weren't able to perceive it. Now, let's look into panel discussions. So, here, we have two or more people speaking right after each other. Ideally, there would be a time to prepare reactions to what other panelists have said. But silence during public during panel discussions is considered awkward. In art history terms, we could say that there is kind of a horror vacui of silence. So panelists talk right after each other, which means that they have to prepare their reactions while other panelists are still speaking. This can lead to embarrassing situations when a panelist asks about something that has been already answered. Not paying attention is usually considered a bad thing. But there are various reasons for not paying attention. So it's like when you read a book, sometimes you zone out because you are too tired. But sometimes you stop reading because you start to ponder about what you've just read. And Roland Barthes, in his book, The Pleasure of the Text, writes that the best pleasure he gets from reading a book is when it makes him frequently look up and think about what he read. When you are not paying attention during a lecture, because you started to think about something that you heard or seen during a lecture, it is a good thing. And now it looks like I still have some time left. So, and since this is a conference about the relationship between art and science, I would like to say something about interdisciplinary projects combining art and science. So, maybe you already seen this graph from the field of robotics about uncanny valley hypothesis. So on this x-axis, there is human likeness. So it goes from not similar to human at all, and 100% similar. And on that y-axis, you have affinity, or how close should one feel to an object. So there are things like industrial robot, which is pretty neutral, and then there is a human, like healthy human, and then you should feel completely close to that. But according to this hypothesis, there is a point when something that looks very much like a living human, but it is not, it creates uncanny feelings, or it elicits uncanny emotions. Now, I think that something similar is going on also with art and science projects. So now, instead of human likeness, we have here, we could put there science likeness. So artworks done in mediums like painting or a bronze sculpture, they don't resemble science at all. So nobody expects from them to be scientific. And then when you have a scientific paper, that should be 100% scientific. But when there is something that looks like science, for example, an art event where somebody is using instruments, scientific instruments, which are, however, not used really in a scientific way. Hopefully there are some other qualities to it. It can create also uncanny feelings. And an example of this uncanny valley, or of the things that fall in this uncanny valley, is this graph itself, because there is no reason why it looks like scientific image, but there is no reason why there are two lines here, and I have no idea what would be on the y-axis now. And when scientists see things like this, there are red flags coming up in their heads. So to have some transparency, sometimes it's good to give actual red flags to the scientists in the crowd, as I did here when I used EEG cups to monitor mind wandering during one previous lecture. But also artists have sometimes red flags coming up in their heads when they see how visual material is used in the scientific world. So for example, when they see lack of imagination in the covers of otherwise very good books about imagination. On the other hand, scientists sometimes create an artwork without being aware of it. For example, in one experiment, neuroscientists created a VR environment where when you are inside the VR, it simulates you sitting in front of a computer and watching a video on a 2D display in front of you. And I wish it was my idea because I think it's a beautiful piece of conceptual art. So I hopefully run out of time by now because I have nothing left to prepare. So thank you in case you managed to pay attention, but also if you were mind wandering.
I think that I should ask you about the questions.
Yeah, please don't ask 2 questions at the same time. I cannot remember them.
All right. Thanks a lot for brilliant, ironic, wonderful presentation. Still, we've got some time for, I don't know, maybe question, maybe comments. Everything is up. All right. Who was the first? But I need to say that I would love to for all of my academics colleagues to see your paper. That would be wonderful.
Thank you, Magda, for your Czechoslovakian humor. I really enjoyed it. My advice for future is if you're going fully analog, maybe you should use this overhead projector and change slides, you know, like analog ones.
Yeah, that's the problem that you haven't seen my longer lecture shows.
Yes,
because there I use overhead projection. Yeah.
I hope next time you'll be a keynote speaker and you can present more things. So, but I'm thinking, maybe we can speak later. But I also in some conferences we had similar presentations where you reflect on the presentation mode, and I think we should make a conference at some point about conference.
Yeah. Actually, there is one like Roger Penrose is like a physicist and he's interested in consciousness. And he got Nobel Prize recently, and he uses 1 or 2 overhead projectors, and he has sometimes even like 6 or 7 layers of transparencies, and he uses like lots of colors and draws their images. So I really like that. I haven't seen that things like this in humanities very much, but in science you can find such things. Yeah.
Are there any more comments?
Have you heard the phrase edutainment? Yeah, so it's probably apparent, but just to delineate the term, edu, so education, and then the second half of the term entertainment, so edutainment. And what you've presented here is actually an extremely good example of edutainment. And this is what you and I were discussing at lunch, actually, without your realizing it, and I just wasn't using that terminology because we just didn't get into things into enough detail. But your talk was just very clever and a great example of edutainment. And I just thought, you know, that would be, I don't know, a term that you might like to Google. Thank you.
And really, really thank you. And I would like to say that in educational practice, we sometimes use such like methods like critical pedagogy or something like that. But this is brilliant example of critical attitude to critical attitude. Yeah, it's like a comment on comment. It's like some kind of meta-theoretical position. And we spoke before that artistic research could itself create some kind of meta-interpretation position, and no, there is perfect example. Thank you.
And maybe I will add to the previous comment that, but for me, it's not so much like it's not the entertainment is not like the main goal, like, but maybe in the line of what the previous speaker was saying, through some other ways, not just like speaking, but through visual materials, you can think about images, or so it's not just for entertainment, but I see it as another way of to think.
There's a whole spectrum for education. You can be slanted towards the education aspect of it, or the entertainment aspect of it.
We'll just the last short comment.
Thank you very much. This was very interesting. Well, I was wondering, maybe my mind was wondering, I mean, have you mentioned, this could have been also a very nice example. I was wondered while giving lectures on artistry, some of the students draw, they make designs, and a couple of times I said, just one day I will collect them all and have an exhibition of the design drawn. And have you ever thought about this, or you mentioned maybe?
No, but I would like to see that book or exhibition when it's done.
All right, let's thank the speaker again.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming. Definitely it's a great challenge to have a talk after such a nice talk or stand-up. But there was one thing mentioned that if you have your talk in the end, it's indistinguishable, with other talks. So maybe no one really will notice what my talk will be about, and will mix it with another talks. Because it's only 15 minutes, I have to go quite briefly with the matters that I wanted to present. There is a question in the title of the talk: are the hypotheses of the science of biologically inspired aesthetics are testable? Evolutionary aesthetics is a discipline that tries to explain some human aesthetic foundations and preferences in relation to art or to other domains, in terms of its evolutionary adaptiveness. So it's kind of bridge between humanities and science, biological science mostly. The paradigm of evolutionary psychology, I think it's something quite obvious here, and what I really want to say today is, is it testable? And I like to provide some research that we have done in our team, trying to make this evolutionary aesthetic claims, kind of proof or experimental, empirical evidences. So just a couple of things about evolutionary aesthetics itself. It's definitely interdisciplinary research. It tries to make this, bridge between humanities and biology, and those interdisciplinary methods are like paleoanthropological studies, like cross-cultural ethological studies. It's also some neurosciences, especially neuroaesthetics, involved in this, and also some psychological studies that I want to refer in my talk. Main issues behind evolutionary approaches to art and aesthetics are the main question: what sort of product is art? Is it just a cultural, overlay, or is it's like just only related to some historical facts and issues, or we can say that it also have some deep biological roots that are connected with our evolutionary nature. So the main issue that stays behind is that can we say something about core function of art in our human evolutionary history, or is it just what we call art is just a set of practices that no really matters to our survival in the prehistorical times and doesn't have any evolutionary adaptive function. So as I said before, evolutionary psychology is something that is treated as a paradigm, especially, because it treats all these evolutionary findings and Darwinian perspective into, this psychological understanding of human nature, and also it's tried to focus on this genetical inheritance. And we have these two different perspectives in humanities. One perspective is this blank slate perspective, that we're born as humans without any capacities, like a blank slate, and it's because of the evolutionary findings you can say that we have already existed some interest capacities, and there is some kind of universal human nature that stays behind this cultural overlay. If we go into revolution, of course there are some kind of issues that quite important when we are talking about the evolutionary approach. So basically, if we take a look at the Darwinian explanations, natural selection theory, and also sexual selection theory, there are like three kind of products of evolution. You can say that the adaptations, so some inherited and very easily developing capacities that are like kind of inborn, or we can treat them as a kind of instinctual and inherited behaviors or just capacities. There are also some byproducts which are also strongly engaged in the evolutionary process, but they don't have a strict adaptive function, evolutionary function. So they are just kind of side effects of other evolutionary adaptations. And there are also some random effects of the genetic drift, which we call noise in this theory of evolution. So here is one slide that refers to the previous talk, because not only in terms of methodology, because it's also questioned by some of the critics, because what evolutionary psychology says that we have this not just a modular mind, that we have different instincts or capacities for different functions, and they are switching off when we face the particular adaptive problem, or we have some challenges and our minds react instinctively to the particular situation. So if you have a situation of humor, we are reacting with laughter, which is not controlled in any way. And it's the same with some other adaptive features of human mind, like we can name it like beauty, gossiping, face recognition, mate choice, deception, food aversion, and so on. We can name plenty of such instinctual situations, and our reactions to them are very sudden. Just to name one of them, gossiping is something that comes to us very easy when we are talking about something. After 3 minutes, when we already talk about important things, we start to talking about third parts which are not present in the moment. So it's something that comes very instinctively and naturally to us. My question in this talk and in the research that I provide is how to connect the evolutionary science with art, and one of the main issues of evolutionary aesthetics is art and adaptation, is art behavior and adaptive feature of our mind, which means in terms of empirical studies in cross-cultural psychology, can we say that art is a trait that enhances reproductive rate of our ancestors? There are plenty of theories in the field of evolutionary aesthetics. Here we have some of the positions of the writers that are making the claim about adaptive functions of art and being artists and art behaviors. And one of the questions is: did art have an adaptive function in our ancestors? Does it still have this kind of function? Most of the writers, most of the scientists say that yes, and they possess some adaptive functions that art might serve within human experience, like informative simulation of experience, cognitive play with patterns, art as alternative behavior scenarios, art behaviors like encouraging prosocial attitudes, signaling thingness, and so on. There are also some other writers who say that art is not an adaptation, and that is arbitrary, and it's a byproduct of some other adaptive traits. Here are some of those theories, and I think I mentioned that they are mostly not testable. So there's not empirical research on this. A lot of theories, no empirical research. Almost, art is always on the end of the funds of the finances. So they measure everything, especially in psychology. So they measure cooperation. They make money for some questions of ethics, there are plenty of areas, but art is always on the end of the clue. So we are trying to make it different. So we make this empirical research with our team of cross-cultural psychology group. And we did it in the tribal societies, because probably you heard about this, but study in the psychology, they are mostly done on so-called Western populations. We call them weird people, which is the acronym of the mentioned. So Western educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, and it's around 17% of the population of whole world, and 99.5% of research is done on those people, mostly on psychology students, to be honest, which is quite not very rare, but it's I know it from my experience as well with my MA students. They do it with their colleagues in the labs or in the corridors of the department. So we're trying to fix it, and it's also according to one of the evolutionary psychology claims that if we want to test some evolutionary hypothesis, we have to do it within the people or with the societies who are living their lives the same way that people from the prehistory times were living. So some of the members of our team, they go to Papua New Guinea, and that's part of our team. And they try to figure out whether adaptive function of art is testable. And we can say that being an artist in the tribal society is adaptive. So this is Papua, the Indonesian part of Papua, and there are people of Asmat and Komoro. Maybe you heard about Asmat people. They are famous of doing masks and some carvings, and also masks and shields, or I'm not sure. Yeah, mostly masks and some sculptures. Just let me recall. Yeah, we go back to this anyway. That's the situation. That's because I'm very hurried, because 15 minutes sounds to me like very depressing to tell all the research. This is the big house of the people. It's this is house for males. They are sitting there, hiding from women, and pretending that they are doing something, but they are sitting there, and mostly have spending their leisure time. And here is the negotiation with the tribes people if they can stay and make a research for some days. Those people didn't agree actually, so they have to go to another village. But at least they find some very prominent artists of this group, and what we did. There are some pictures from those villages that they passed through, going down by the rows. So what was the matter of the study? As I say, the main question behind evolutionary approaches is art behavior adaptive capacity. So the question is adaptation byproduct or not connected to adaptation at all. So there are like three models. Artistic abilities are directly responsible for reproductive success. cognitive abilities might be responsible for adaptive success, no matter if you are artist or not, and no connection between artistic abilities and reproductive success. Sounds quite reductionist to my mind, but well, that is the question of my title of the talk. Is it can we say that some evolutionary aesthetics claims are empirically testable? So the study consists of 231 male members of Asmat and Komoro societies. They are indigenous people, so they are living their lives in the hunter-gatherer way. So they usually don't have very stable settlements. They move from one place to another every couple of years. They don't have they own animals. They don't have a lot of possession that they keep for ages. The sample consisted of 101 self-described artists, which means that were really considered as artists by the other members of the society, and 130 non-artists, and all those participants were residing in 10 villages. So what was the method of measuring if being an artist might result in reproductive success? There's very easy measurement. Reproductive success was measured by the number of children, which is, I have to be more clear, because in tribal societies they don't have control of reproduction. Intercourses means usually that they have children. So attracting mates means that they have more children than the others. Also, we measured 3 things that we decided are very much related to being an artist, especially in the tribal societies: consciousness, creativity, and visual motor control. Consciousness was measured using the so-called Costa-Macri subscale. So I'm not going deeply into this because I don't have time. Creativity was assessed with a so-called alternative uses task, in which participant is asked to generate as many unique uses for the object as possible. So in this case, it was a stone. So if he decided to, if he said that find out 2 uses for the stone, there's a small creativity. If you find 7 uses for the stone, it's a high creativity. And also visual motor coordination was measured with Purdue pegboard test. It's like with your hands. You probably know this test. It's quite difficult to make this for the, especially. I was really it was really hard for me, for example, to measure out this. So what was the results? We have the schemas here of after putting some statistical models. I'm not going to. I'll just explain what they show. So the results show that artists indeed have higher reproductive success, measured by number of the children, than non-artists. But this relation could be fully explained by artists' higher consciousness and creativity, and not visual motor control. In other words, individuals who are highly consciousness or grit and had a higher creativity level, but not those with high visual motor coordination, had more children, regardless of being an artist or not. So being an artist is a byproduct of other adaptive traits like consciousness and creativity. So among those people before, Pinker was right. Being an artist is not an adaptive feature, but just a byproduct of other adaptive behaviors. So this is our team, including Stephen Davis, Piotr Sorokowski, myself, and Marta Kowal. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. Still, we've got time for questions and comments. Everything is clear.
Thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting, especially for me. I have a background in evolution. I mean, like, I just this year graduated from biology, and my specialization was evolution. And I actually never heard about this kind of evolutionary aspects of research in aesthetics. So for me, that was very, very interesting new experience. And thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much. I strongly recommend. There are a couple of books, like, mostly with those theories, but the art instinct seems to quite like the introductory thing for the evolutionary approach to art and aesthetics. Also, our co-author of the paper, Stephen Davis, The Artful Species by Stephen Davis. Also, Homo Aestheticus by Ellen D. Sanayaka. So there are plenty of books and papers about it, but most of those hypotheses, most of those theories are not empirically tested. So we are the one that try to do it.
All right, we've got another comment or question.
Yeah, you sort of half answered my question just then. I mean, yeah, you said most of these books really don't look into the empirical side of it, and you're doing that. Are there a lot of people doing it, or is it, are you really at the cutting edge in that respect?
Yeah, as I said, it's really hard with the fanciful art, things. I'm just recently a member of the cross-cultural psychology lab, and they did all the research from mating and exchanging things and so economical behavior and all the things, and only art left for them. So they asked me if we can do this together. So,
but creativity, which is what you're concluding is of evolutionary importance. Yeah. That is, for a lot of businesses, there's money in creativity studies, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but to be honest, it's not so much always related to artistic activities. There's creativity in children, how they learn maths, for example, or how they solve problems, and how you solve problems in a work environment. But art is always like an example, but they always skip immediately.
But your conclusion is actually it's the creativity that's important, not the being of the artist.
Yeah, the creativity. Yeah, we decided that apart from the consciousness, creativity might be something that is universal in art behaviors, no matter if you take tribal societies or the modern societies. It was always, but it's not one feature. We said that consciousness, which is not always connected with the contemporary art, to my mind, because what really matters is idea, for example, in the conceptual art, for example.
Well, we could have an argument about that. But anyway, I thought it was a great presentation, really interesting. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if there is any future for philosophers. Did you identify in that, or is that possible to identify philosophers in that society? And and what is the reproduction success?
The problem is that they don't even have a concept of art. So I don't think they have a concept of philosopher, but definitely they do have.
But maybe we can identify it, still.